Hi, everybody. Firstly, I must thank the organizers for inviting me to talk about this story. And I think it's a lovely story in continuation with the earlier session, which was on hope. So, every story is made up of stories of its own, and then a story generates more stories. I'm actually going to talk of yeah. Okay. I'm going to talk of stories which started this journey and how it has actually continued from what was a very unusual start. So I live in Delhi, and I have a friend called Sanjay Thakur who works very extensively in the Central Indian landscape, the landscape of tigers, gore, leopards, protected areas. And he was passing by through Delhi and he was at my place. And he had just come back from Panna Tiger Reserve. How many of you have heard of Panna? How many of you have heard of Panna for diamonds? Okay, so the other diamond, probably the more important diamond of Panna, are tigers. So he was coming back from the Panna Tiger Reserve and he was talking to me about tigers and tigers. And I said, wasn't Panna the place which lost all its tigers? And so he looked at me and said, Peeyush, you think that you're a naturalist and interested in wildlife and you go out and stuff, and you don't even know that tigers have come back to Panna. So I said, wow, how is it possible? Why doesn't anybody know about this? And next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Yeah. So Sanjay kind of challenged me and said that, okay, you're concerned about the fact that nobody knows about it. So what's stopping you from doing something about that? So in some sense, this journey or this story started with that conversation. And he knew the park director, Mr. Murthy. And I had done some work earlier with children's literature, some manuals for children. So we thought, why not think of a book for children? So before I continue, let me just put the place in context. Can you go to the earlier slide, please? Okay. So on the left, you can make out that there's a map of Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and right on top, in the middle is Panna. And on the right-hand side, you can see the larger map of Panna, and the portion marked in the middle is the core of the Tiger Reserve. It's about 1,500 square kilometers, everything combined, with about 500 kilometers being the core. It's a very interesting, rugged landscape. It's a stunning landscape. I'll show you some images as we go along. Right, please continue. So I decided to travel. I took an overnight train to Khajuraho. Khajuraho is, again, a very well-known place, and Panna and Khajuraho are actually next to one another. So just imagine a World Heritage Site like Khajuraho and a tiger reserve like Panna. And and I felt that I didn't know about it. It was a bit disappointing. I was disappointed myself. Next slide, please. Next. Yeah. So I went and met Mr. Murthy, and he was a little surprised. He said, what is this guy from Delhi doing here? And I get all these people coming like this out of some interest, but never really take it further. And he told me that if you're really interested in writing a book for children, I'm happy to work with you. But you need to show more interest. In the sense, you need to go beyond this calling me up and coming and seeing me. So I told him, yes, I will show more interest. And I came back and we did some field work. It was very important to get a sense of the landscape, the people working in it. And just to show you very quick images, on the left you have a team that's tracking a tiger, which has a collar. The collar is on the right. They have these transmitters that they follow. And very interestingly, in Panna, they would celebrate a tiger birthday, the only tiger birthday celebration in the world, I think. And I was lucky to be part of that celebration. And you can see these two lovely cakes. And the ceremony was unique because more than anything else, it was felicitating, honoring the guards, the people on the ground, the foot soldiers in the conservation story. And, in some sense, that attachment or that engagement with Panna started through this field work. Please continue. Next. Now, every story needs its narrative, it needs its characters. We were working with no resources, just an idea. And we also are working in the green space, right? So we decided they were going to recycle some stuff. So the character on the left is Megha for this book. She was somebody else for another book that we had done earlier, created by a friend called Deepti Radhakrishnan, who's an illustrator based out of Bangalore. So we decided to reuse Megha. In the sense, we just renamed her, but we thought that the character made a lot of sense. And in our conversations with these two lovely gentlemen on the right, they're not old, they're young gentlemen, and they ran the Panna nature camps, which I'll talk about later. We identified a girl who was very active in this space and very curious. And so we created Megha. Next slide, please. We created Megha as this girl who comes from this little village in the Panna landscape, who is curious, who is not afraid of asking questions, who dreams, and who really enjoys being in her Panna. So she became our main character. And in the earlier slide, you would have seen that there was a gentleman next to her. He is Mr. Murthy. And we thought that the book or the narrative will be a conversation between Megha and the park director. And that allowed us sometimes to also ask simple questions or even sometimes difficult questions. Because a little girl, in all her innocence and curiosity, can very easily ask difficult questions to the park director, which I or you may be feeling awkward about. Next slide. So the journey of this book actually starts at a very sad note. And the sad note is that in 2009, the Forest Department finally agreed or accepted that there were virtually no tigers left in Panna. It had happened earlier in Saraska Tiger Reserve in 2006. There was a repeat happening here in Panna where apparently there was just one male tiger left. It took time for the Forest Department to accept it, but once they did, they put a reintroduction plan in place. And since there was one male tiger, they decided to bring two female tigers from other parks, from Bandhavgarh and Kanha, and release them there with the names T1 and T2. Okay? Now what happens is that by the time the two tigresses come and they're released, the Forest Department realizes that the lone male tiger has disappeared. They don't know where he's gone, whether he's dead or alive, but effectively their reintroduction program has stuck because you've got two female tigers and you don't have a male tiger. And hence, from Pench, they bring a male tiger, T3. Now, you may be wondering, what is this? Are they like eggs in the market that you go and pick up eggs and you bring them and release them? It's not so simple. It's very complex. You have to identify the right candidate. You have to sedate them. You have to then keep them under observation, check that they're in good health. And then you move them very carefully to the new park. And then you let them acclimatize. A bit like what we saw with the cheetahs in Kuno recently. So maybe all of you are aware, but similar thing happened with tigers. And I would say that the Kuno experiment with cheetahs has also been possible because of exercises like this that the Forest Department has done earlier. So they decide to bring in T3. T3 is brought in, he is released, and he is acclimatized about a month. And they decide to actually release him in the forest, in the open forest. This is the first pug mark of T3 in the open forest. But what does T3 do? T3 decides that Panna is not the place for him. And as soon as he's released, he starts moving. And soon, he moves out of the park boundaries. Next. And T3 fortunately has this collar and they can track him. And the Forest Department is really worried because not only is T3 moving out, it also means that T3 is at risk now of engaging in an unknown territory with human beings, with farmlands, with livestock. And what if there is, a trap put for wild boar and T3 gets caught? There are lots of challenges. So they start tracking T3 to the extent possible using technology. Next slide. And this smart guy starts really moving south. And after some time, what they realize is that he's moving in a landscape which probably had not seen tigers for 50 years, maybe even 100 years, because the landscape has completely changed. And there were portions where they couldn't find a signal. The signal is also dependent on other factors, including what's the cover, whether the animal is in the gorge. So what they started doing is that they started identifying really old people from those villages where they thought T3 was. And they would tell them that, look, there's a tiger in your area. And if there's a tiger in your area, where would it be? And this old gentleman would say, you know what? There is a nala out there where there'll be some water and it'll be shade and it'll be like, the temperatures will be like comfortable for a tiger. We haven't seen tigers forever. I don't believe you. But if there's a tiger in this landscape, in this heat, you'll find him there. So at many places, they were actually able to locate T3 by these kind of conversations. But it seemed very clear that T3 was not stopping anywhere. T3 was on the move. And they were really wondering how to catch him. Because it's not that just because you see a tiger, you can sedate it. There's a number of conditions that play a role, including where the tiger may move. After it's sedated, can we actually go and locate him quickly? And so this following T3 went on for about 45 days. And in that time, T3 traveled about 450 kilometers. And they discovered that actually T3 had managed to reorient himself in the direction of Pench. That is the tiger reserve from where he was brought. And he was basically trying to just get back home. And what was interesting is that this behavior may be known to me and you because you realize that somebody took their dog and left it far away, and after a few days, the dog came back. It happens with cats. It happens, people have documented this with leopards. But this was the first time that they had actually got scientific evidence of the homing instinct. It's called the homing instinct in animals or even in humans, where this animal, he was brought in sedated in an aircraft. So it was not that he had gone by a certain route and he was just retracing it, right? He had just reoriented himself. And he walked 45 days, covered 450 kilometers before he could be captured and brought back. Next slide. So this is T3. There's a whole story one can narrate about what's happening here. But basically, when you tranquilize a tiger, it's a very delicate situation to be in because you can never be 100% sure that the tiger is completely tranquilized. And you have a very short window of time within which you have to do some tests, check its health, and then put it in a secure enclosure and revive it. So here you can see that they cover the eyes because that reduces disturbance to the tiger. And it's on a stretcher. And I was witness to another such incident. And I can tell you that carrying a tiger, you need at least 10 people. And you need 10 really strong people. All of them have to be gymming seriously because tigers are heavy and they're huge. So this is T3. And now the thing is that, okay, the forest department got T3 back to Panna and they re-released it. But what would stop T3 from going back? Any ideas what you could do if you had a tiger and you wanted the tiger to remain where you released it? What would you do?
Give what it needs.
Okay, very good. There's food, there's water.
The habitat has to be reconstructed.
The habitat was in good shape already. It was already tiger reserve. There was spray, there was water, there was shade.
Some of it reminds the tiger of its own home. Maybe another tiger there.
There were two tigresses.
From the same place.
You're getting close to when you're talking of other tigers, but it's family. No, male tigers are not so much family people unless introduce. Ah, interesting. And how are you going to do that? You're going to say, hi, T3. There are two other tigresses here, Hello. But you're getting close, yeah. Sorry? How?
Captive breeding, put them in a zoo for a temporary period.
Okay. So let's say you can't really do that with wild tigers, and especially, males and females, completely wild tigers. If you're going to catch them, put them in a zoo, you don't know what's going to happen. Plus, there are lots of risks involved. But you're getting close. We have to get T3 to know that there are some interesting females in this neighborhood. So how are you going to do it? 100%. Very nice. How?
So, Calvin Klein, the scent, they like. I read about an article that the perfume, Calvin Klein, they, in order to capture the tigers, they spray the perfume.
Okay, this is something I haven't heard. But what is perfume for tigers? Urine. Yeah, so the Calvin Klein for tigers is urine. So, what they did is, and this came out of a discussion amongst forest officers and researchers and people there. They said that why don't we let T3 know that there are some interesting females in its neighborhood and females in heat, right? You can't obviously go and tell T1 and T2 that, look, we need a little bit of urine, there's an interesting guy around. So they went to the Bhopal Zoo. There was a female in heat. They collected the urine of this female. And basically in an area where there was a good chance that T3 would interact or encounter one of these two tigresses, they actually went and sprayed this urine in that landscape. And believe it or not, it worked. T1 met T3, T3 met T1. They mated, and next slide, please. In a amazing rock-filled gorge, T1 gave birth to the first litter of the return of tigers to Panna. And if I remember the date right, it's April 10, 2010. And that's the day when we celebrate the tiger birthday in Panna every year. This, of course, is not a great photograph in terms of its resolution here, but it's a brilliant photograph. And this was the first day when the forest department discovered the litter, and that is celebrated as the birthday. And some of these cubs made it to maturity, some didn't. But this became the founding population of Panna's tigers. Next slide. And, of course, using that iconic image, we made this book in Hindi and English called Our Tigers Return, and in Hindi, Hamare Baghon Ki Vapsi. There's a whole team, of course, of people that were involved. Most of them worked at a very, very reasonable rate. Many of them just volunteered their work. So I won't take everybody's names, but I'm really grateful to all of them, including staff of the Panna Tiger Reserve. Next slide. This is the release function we did. And in all the intelligence of Mr. Murthy, he actually organized a function which was like a huge ceremony full of pride for the people of Panna, the leaders, political leaders, social activists, students were all invited in a mega event, and we released the book there. It was a real, fun event. There were children who had already read the book in the time that we gave it to them at the start of the ceremony. By the time we called them to talk, they had already finished reading the book, and they talked about it. Next. And it's, at least for us, it was very important that the story of Panna go back to the children of Panna. That was the idea to start with. So there are these nature camps through which we gave copies to the children of Panna for a number of years now. The book was published in 2015, I think. Next. We also raised money through crowdfunding and organized copies for the guides, for the drivers, for the forest guards, because it's often these people who are the foot soldiers. These are the people who are telling the story of Panna to visitors, to their own families. Next. When it came to actually talking about the book to children, I was a bit stumped, because I said, children are I can't go and read the book to them. It's not going to work. So then we started thinking of how it can become interesting. So we did this little stuff that I got off the internet, and I simplified it a bit. So these are some small exercises that we do where we color, cut, fold, and it's called Bringing a Dead Tiger Alive, or Bringing a Dead Bear Alive. Next, please. Workshops, we haven't been able to do as much as we like, but this was a workshop we did with teachers from schools in the Panna area, including a nature walk and different tools that they can use to talk about nature and wildlife to their students. quizzing, jigsaw puzzles, craft. Next, please. And the story continues. In 2019, we actually, Mr. Murthy organized this walk where we followed the trail of T3. And I did some drawings of the people we met along the way. And some of them, of course, were more than happy to pose with their pictures. Next. I'm sure all of you are now keen to know what is the actual population of tigers in Panna. So currently, there are different figures. I'm not sure what the exact numbers are, but the Forest Department put out a report in June this year which says that including cubs, so normally when you're counting tigers, you don't count cubs, but this is the figure I have from their report, where in the larger landscape, they are thinking they're going to be about 84 to 86 tigers by the end of this year. This, of course, is an image by a friend, Abhinav Pandey. And this is one of the Panna landscapes along the Cane River. Next slide, please. The 2018 census that was carried out by the National Tiger Conservation Authority has put the numbers at a much more conservative, but this is based on hard data. It's about 36 tigers in that landscape. This is about 4 or 5 years old data. Next slide, please. We can't run this little film here, but if you're keen, it's on YouTube. It's a little film I made about 2.5 minutes using shadow puppetry, which narrates this story of Panna in 2.5 minutes. It's like a little animation. It was good fun to make, and you can check it out on YouTube. It's called Our Tigers Return. Next slide, please. That's it. And why this photograph to end it is, of course, a stunning photograph, but this is where the first litter was born. And one of the tigers from the first litter still frequents this place. And I just want to say that, you know, our landscapes are stunning. We don't always know how stunning they are. And these landscapes are made of some really amazing wildlife, but also some amazing people. And these people are often the ones we don't see or we don't know of. And my request to all of you would be that in all the interest for wildlife, which I'm completely with you on, I would also love that you all, whenever you go out in nature or otherwise, look for these people's stories, look for these people, appreciate their work, learn about it, because they are the true, guardians of our heritage. Thanks so much.